born?
My name is Lynda Stewart, Lynda with a Y, and I was born in Waltham, Massachusetts. It's kind of funny how I started to become a mascot. I was a professional clown, starting at about 17 years of age, Bubbles the Clown, and actually I started out as Bingo the Clown for a ground round in Massachusetts. And then when I moved out to Michigan, my sister made me a couple of costumes and I became Bubbles the Clown. At one point, I was kind of down a little bit. I had broken up a relationship and my mother passed away and I just was really down and out. And I saw an advertisement for Slappy interviews. And I called and I said, "Are you still looking for a mascot?" And they said, "Yep, we're doing interviews this weekend." And I went and I auditioned 4 to 5 other gentlemen. And there was another gentleman that was actually hired as Slappy, and I was hired as his backup, which meant I would be his bodyguard and just kind of look out for him. Or if he didn't show up or was sick, I was to take over for him. I always showed up to work, you know, early. I got the costume ready, I got all the props ready at every game, and then he would show up and then just get in the costume and go do his thing. Well, it came to the point where one day he showed up about 15 minutes before he was supposed to be on the ice. And my supervisor said, "You need to get in the costume." And I was shaking. I was like, "Oh no, I'm not ready for this." And just as I went down to put the costume on, he appeared and he got in the costume. And my supervisor said, "Tell him to take it off." And I said, no, you know, he can wear it, you know, because I wasn't really prepared, mentally prepared. So then another night he called about an hour before the game and he said that he was not going to come to the game. So my supervisor said, "It's time, you need to get in the costume." So I got in the costume and I did my thing. It was funny because when I auditioned for the game, or for the mascot position, I asked, "Do I need to know how to skate?" Because I hadn't skated in about 25 years. And they're like, "Well, yeah, you know, you're a hockey player." And I was like, "Okay, you know." So I had rollerblades and I rollerbladed a little bit, but it's different than ice skating. And so when I first got on the ice, I was a wreck. I was just all over the place. You know, I had figure skates on at the time because that's what I knew how to do, was figure skate. And they would put props down on the ice and I would skate over them and fall, you know, because like once you're not on the ice anymore, you're done for. So I would always be falling and tripping and doing all kinds of silly stuff. And so after a year of skating, I actually had practiced and I became a lot better. And some of the fans commented the next year on how happy they were. They had a better skater than the one they had the year before, not knowing it was actually me. So yeah, that's how that happened. Okay, my understanding is I took the position over from Peter Stobie, Peter Stobie, or he goes by Pete Stobie. My understanding is that he had designed a nest up in the upper corner, I think by section 12, 13, up in the upper corner, and he designed a nest, and then he built a big egg. And the egg sat there for a while, and, you know, for the big, you know, woo, you know, hatching of Slappy. And on October 31st of 1997, Slappy emerged from the egg. And that was Slappy's birthday, was October 31st, 1997. I started working as Slappy in 1999 until 2013.
And did you travel with the team to the games on the road? And if so, what was that like?
I traveled for the all-star game in Dallas, Texas, which was fabulous, exciting. That was in 1999, 2000, when Ted Parfait owned the team. And that was a fun, exciting experience. The Zamboni had just cleared the ice, and they put a lot of water down, and I went to skate out on the ice, and I fell down. Actually, the Zamboni wasn't finished clearing the ice. I fell down, and it was sopping wet with water, and then I couldn't get up because it was so slippery, so I had to crawl as fast as I could to get out of the way of the Zamboni. There was a mall there, and we got to skate with people around the mall, and we had a great time while we were in Dallas, Texas. I looked forward to go swimming, but the pool was down at the time. The only other times I traveled with the team was when the booster club would pay for my bus ticket and would make arrangements with the other teams for me to appear. I went to Port Huron. I went to Grand Rapids when we were IHL. And I also went to Fort Wayne. And Fort Wayne was not the best. I mean, the mascots, I always had fun with the mascots, but the fans were not as nice. The little kids kept high-fiving me, and little did I realize they had mustard all over their hands. And every time I high-fived them, they got mustard on my wing. And all of a sudden, and they were laughing, you know, and I didn't think anything of it, and I was starting to walk away, and all I could smell was mustard. And then I looked at my wing, and there was mustard smeared all over it. So that wasn't the most pleasant experience I had, but the fans were actually pretty good. Every time I went to a different stadium, they were always nervous. The workers there and the mascots, they were nervous that I would get hurt or have some problems with the fans. I actually didn't, you know, I had a couple of boos, you know, from Fort Wayne, but overall, I was a very friendly mascot, so I really didn't have any problems with anyone. I think the worst part was getting mustard all over me, and then I couldn't really high-five people after that as well, you know, without them smelling like mustard too. My favorite thing was to just go, yay, K-Wings! So I was always known as doing the yay, you know, wherever I was. I also, when we played the YMCA, I would actually act out the YMCA to like all the words. Like, young man, you know, don't feel down, you know, things like that. I also had a pouch, which was a fish, Teddy the Trout, and he was filled with confetti. And whenever there was a happy moment, whether we scored a goal, it was someone's birthday, or just Slappy wanted to have fun, I would pull my confetti out and throw it all over the audience. The custodians called that Slappy poop, because Slappy was leaving his poop everywhere, and they had to clean it up. So that was fun. The other thing was if I ever saw popcorn on the floor, I would get down and I would start pecking at it, pretending to eat it. So that was one of my other, you know, signatures. I can't think of a whole lot more that, you know, I mean, people know, like, they knew who Slappy was, and they could tell if for some reason I was not in the costume, they could tell it wasn't me. So I always told all the other mascots that visited our stadium, or when I would go to visit their stadium, that I was a friendly mascot and I would not partake in anything vicious. I wanted kids to have a good, you know, role model and not be fighting. And because when there were fights in the stands, when there were fights on the ice, I'd be like, no fighting, bad, no, bad. So I always had, you know, a good rapport with the other mascots. Although, when it got down to it, I also had some of their little plush dolls. And yes, I would kind of
drag them along, or, you know, I have the walleye on a fishing pole, and I would drag the walleye around on a fishing pole, and Icy from Fort Wayne, I would put kind of like crosses over his eyes like he was dead. I mean, so yeah, I did have a little bit of rivalry there, but kind of in a good way. Well, the funny thing is when I first started working there, I was told not to go in Section 8 because that was where the parfaits sat, and they did not care for the mascot. And I was really disappointed about that, you know, because people would say, come see us, you know, we're in Section 8. And I'd be like, and you don't talk as a mascot. But I'd like, can't do it. You know, I'm in my head, like, and I would actually talk in the costume to myself. You know, I was always talking to myself, and probably not out, obviously not out loud, but I'd be like, oh, I can't do that. Oh, you're so cute, you know, things like that. But I was told not to go into Section 8 because that's where the parfaits had seats, and they did not care for the mascot. So, but then I met the parfaits out of costume, and they told me how much they liked me, and so then after that I was able to go visit them and Section 8 again. So I was really happy about that. The players, I didn't really interact with the players a whole lot, but they would give me a high five. It was funny because everybody thought Slappy was a man, or yeah, everybody thought Slappy was a man, but no, I was a female. So they just assumed that I was in the dressing room with the guys and, you know, hanging out with the guys, and I wasn't. I was in my own dressing room, and I didn't really get to know the guys that much. But all the kids thought I did, and even adults thought I knew the players, you know, but I never really got to know them very well. But they would high-five me, you know. And then some of the players that had kids, I would, you know, obviously get to know their kids and made friends with them that way. So I would say that I had a really good rapport with everybody. The funny thing is the word got out that there was possibly a female in the costume. And people would say, are you a girl or a boy? And I would just flap my wings like, I'm a bird. Like, no identity, I'm a bird. And they're like, are you a girl or a boy? And I'm like, I'm a bird. So I had no identity, you know, like I wouldn't say whether I was a male or female. But word got out that there was a female in the costume. And so people started questioning me and, you know, wanting to know what was going on. But, yeah. I know the first Slappy was a hockey player, and he was a little rough around the edges. I mean, not that that's a bad thing, because Slappy was a hockey player. But when I started, I wanted to be a lover. I just wanted everybody to be friendly and have fun, and I was really there for the kids. Starting out as a professional clown, I was there for not just the kids, for everybody. I just wanted everybody to have fun and be happy. And so I think I did a good thing for the fans. You know, I would always hug them, kiss the women's hands like that I was a male. And oh, that was the funny part, is because someone said, we know that there's a female in the costume because of the way you sit and some of the ways you act. So then I had to portray a male persona. So I started sitting with my legs open and like walking like really in a different way, like more manly, I guess you'd say. So yeah, but I always tried to make sure that everybody was happy and having fun. Well, there was one time that we used to have weddings on the ice, and Slappy would have to go get into the limousine. And I think it was the last wedding we had on the ice. It was a couple of our longtime fans. And I was trying to get out of the limousine because I was the first one out, and my head got stuck. And I couldn't get out, and I thought my head was gonna fall off for sure. And I'm like trying to get out, and Luckily, I ended up getting out, but it was not very graceful. And I thought for sure my head was going to fall off, but it didn't. So I was lucky there. There was one time we would advertise for some car companies, and we had a minivan, and Slappy got out of the minivan. And as I stepped out, I went to shut the door, and my tail got stuck in the door. And it was Velcroed on, and as I skated away, my tail was stuck in the door. And my boss wasn't real happy with it, but there was nothing I could do about it. It was actually kind of funny. It had been a few years that I had already been in the costume, so I could make light of it a lot more than if I had just started, because when I first started, I was just mortified if anything went wrong. And I just kind of laughed that one off. And when I went into the stands, they were like, "Oh, Slappy, you got your tail back," you know, and I'm like, "Yeah," you know. So there was another time that I was losing my tail, and I was out on a public appearance, and I had to ask Mike Meduno to stick my tail back on, and he's like, "Well, how do I do that?" And I said, "Well, you need to reach up into the costume and stick it on the Velcro, you know, on my butt." And he's like, "I don't really feel comfortable doing that." I'm like, "I can't lose my tail," you know. So he ended up doing it, but not really happy about it. I always wore a camelback when I was doing outside appearances. And one time, the nipple of the camelback got stuck in my mouth and the hose fell off. So every time I would bend over, it looked like Slappy was vomiting and water would squirt out. And I was like, you know, first of all, I need the water. And I was like, okay, and there again, I'm with Mike Meduno again, you know, and I'm like, "Mike, you got to put the nipple back onto my camelback." He's like, "What?" You know, and I'm like, I need this water and I need this put back together and I can't do it, you know. And he's like, "Oh my gosh," you know. So I handed him it and then he fixed it, you know. Once again, he wasn't real pleasant or pleased with that. Let's see, what else? Oh, there was one time, a couple of years before I left my position, I don't remember what team we were playing against. It might have been the Florida Everblades. And as I was skating around, because I would, the teams would come out, or I would be introduced. I would skate around, and then the opposing team would come out. And they had the spotlight on me, so I couldn't see very well because the light was shining in my eyes. And the opposing team, one of the players came up and just took me out. I mean, purposely. And I went flying backwards, probably about 6 feet, you know, and landed, and I felt my chin strap, because my helmet was, or my head was attached inside a helmet, and I could feel the helmet come off, basically. And I thought I was exposed. That night, for some reason, I had a black cape on. I don't know if it was like New Year's Eve, but I had a black cape on. And I thought my head had come off. I thought like I was exposed to the whole stadium, and that's the worst thing. You don't want to be exposed to the public as a mascot, because they're not supposed to know who you are, and so on and so forth. So I was like, oh my gosh. Well, luckily I had this black cape on, and I kind of threw it over my head, and I kind of like tried to cinch my head back on, and come to find out it had not come off completely, so I was saved there. But that was probably one of the most horrifying experiences I had, because I thought I had been exposed. Oh, there was another time. When I first started, Pete Stobie told me to, wear a headband or something to absorb the sweat, because oh my gosh, as soon as you get in that costume, you are sweating within 5 minutes, like literally dripping sweat within 5 minutes. And so I had a bandana on, and all of a sudden I was skating out on the ice, and all of a sudden the bandana fell over my eyes, and I couldn't see anything. I had no idea where I was. And I just stood there like, okay, I'm blind. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. I just would take a couple of steps, and Kip, who still works at Wing Stadium, Waukee, who's a security guard, he yells out, he's like, Slappy, are you okay? And I'm like, no. He's like, what's wrong? Are you having a seizure? I'm like, So security and people came out to get me, and they're like, what's wrong? Are you all right? And I'm like, my bandana fell over my eyes. I can't see where I am. So I went off the ice, I fixed my bandana, and I got back out on the ice again, and everybody's like, yay, you know. So that was probably one of my first experiences being traumatized. In 2012, we have what's called, and I'm getting emotional, we have what's called chuck-a-puck, and fans will throw pucks out, like they're rubber pucks with numbers on them. Throw them out on the ice, and to get to a target, and whoever got closest to the target would win a prize. And I would usually stand back out of the way in the penalty box or in the players box and wait for all the pucks to come out. And not being able to see in the costume very well, I went to step out on the ice and I slipped on a chuck-a-puck. And I fell and really hurt my knee, my right knee, really bad. I knew there was a problem. I went back to my dressing room and I got some ice, but I went back out on the ice again. I've done things out on the ice when I had whiplash, I had a dislocated arm, and then I busted up my knee. And I would try not to show any pain because that's how much I loved my job. Because of that injury, I had to retire as Slappy in 2013 because I could no longer run up and down the stairs, which was needed, and no longer be able to do the chicken dance where you have to squat up and down. And yeah, I was not able to fulfill the obligations that I needed to do. So yes, it was a very disappointing time in my life, and that was 2013.